So this platform, I mean, in Turkey, is a bit new one, like a 1 year old maybe, or just more than that. But by becoming a CBI network member, we grew very immediately, especially during the times of disasters. We have done a lot of things until today. I mean, when we say disasters, it's all, natural disasters and man-made disasters, right? What we were dealing with, especially the earthquakes. Earthquakes were the major risk factor in Turkey, and we have done and we're still doing a lot of preparatory work, bringing private sector on the table before a disaster, during it occurs, and then after that. So we were working heavily on the earthquakes, and we have witnessed two minor earthquakes in Turkey, and we had the experience to experiment what we were doing. But then right after, as we all know, the COVID crisis has hit globally, and we have immediately transformed our work to respond to this crisis as good as we can. Just as a background, in Turkey, the government system is strong, and especially from the health point of view, the commissions, the science and health commissions are doing very well and coordinating the whole work, so that we don't need to be in a position to respond immediately. But what we are doing is, first we started analyzing. Let me go back to the presentation, by the way, I forgot it. Let me start with this. What we have done is we have immediately started sharing information about the situation of the crisis. We are watching the globe. In Turkey, it's a bit relatively late that we have witnessed the COVID case, but we were watching and we were preparing ourselves what can be done, and then we have immediately prepared like situation reports. But in a crisis like this, in a fast evolving crisis like this, preparing situation reports doesn't seem the appropriate way of responding and monitoring and providing suggestions. Then we immediately turned our efforts to provide them information, both to the policymakers and to the enterprises, but by hearing from the enterprises themselves, right? The SMEs, especially the vulnerable ones, the most disadvantaged group of the private sector all over the world. We hear, and in the first 15 days of the crisis in Turkey, we have done a survey. The first survey in 2 months ago, and then also we have done a second survey and announced it last week, and again focusing mostly on the SMEs. And how they the initial survey was to see how they have perceived the risk, what are their readiness, what do they need to understand and to respond to the crisis, to change their business models, or whatever they need. So what were the findings is that the SMEs who have immediately transformed their way of working into a digital platform, into the digitalized SMEs, and also the ones who have enabled their employees to work remotely, were the ones who have impacted less, not minimum, of course, not zero, but less than the ones who couldn't adjust themselves to the new way of life. So the digitalization is one of the items that we had to tap into and provide information, especially to the SMEs during their digitalization journey. But what did we do? What did we do with the analysis as a broad? So I forgot to mention the Business for Goals platform's structure at the beginning. I was very anxious about talking about COVID. So Business for Goals platform established in Turkey by 3 organizations. One of them is UNDP, UNDP Turkey office, United Nations Development Program. The other one is TÜSİAD. They are one of the strongest umbrella association, business association in Turkey, basically covering industries, the big ones, let's say. Turkconfed is our other partner. They're the confederation having an outreach capacity to 40,000 SMEs all over Turkey. From all scales and on almost all sectors. So it's a voluntary-based business association. So this has given us the opportunity to both reach out to the many SMEs into our analysis, and also to reach out to the big ones as well, the big companies who has more than 250 employees. What we have been doing before COVID, let me just a minute. Okay. What we have been doing is we have been working around climate change and disaster resilience before COVID. And as I mentioned, the earthquakes was one of the first and foremost important risk factor in Turkey. But of course, with the climate change, we are still, committed to work on the long-term strategies and long-term disaster resilience. The other item was the enabling enterprises to be future fit, what we call it. This is what I've been mentioning, this digitalization journey, like the e-commerce, financial management, and etc., especially for the SMEs. The third item was the inclusive growth. So with inclusive growth, what we were mentioning is that the strengthening the role of the private sector for a more inclusive and diverse way of working. Covering the whole segments of the society, especially when it comes to Turkey, it is important to include the Syrian, the migrants, the refugees, and the asylum seekers into the livelihood. And when it comes to our job, what we have done with the inclusiveness agenda into this, we have also translated our survey into Arabic and conducted to the Syrian-led enterprises as well. And the findings are, of course, not a surprise. Syrian-led enterprises are much more vulnerable than the Turkish-led enterprises in Turkey. There are a couple of reasons for that, of course, and not really, understanding the quick government measures. I mean, and when I say quick, these immediate government measures to support, the enterprises, like the short-term allowance, short-term working allowance, or new lines of credits, and etc. So reaching to the right information is what they're lacking at the moment. So what we did with our analysis. With our 3 major partners, right? UNDP, Turkey, TÜSİAD, and Turkconfed, both have their own policy dialogue mechanisms. All of them have their, different paths for a policy dialogue. We have, publicly shared our findings, and all 3 institutions have used our findings in their policy dialogues. But we also have, as a transparent platform, it was, widely shared with the public, and the media picked our analysis very seriously. All the, the capital, the Fast Company, the Economist, and etc. Like all those, major magazines and newspapers in Turkey picked our findings, especially focusing on the SMEs, especially focusing on the increasing inequalities and regional disparities, how this COVID affected in Turkey. The other one, as I mentioned, I mean, this digitalization campaign, we have transformed many of our ongoing programs, not only us, but also our partner organizations as well, into a digitalization campaign, and have been, doing lots of webinars and, digital discussions into that area. And we also have used our findings as a baseline for our new programs, new projects. And another action that we have taken is to engage other UN agencies. As our UNDP being our partner, they have facilitated this, and we have worked with UN Women, UNFPA, UNIDO, ILO on different fronts. First to design our second survey with the whole holistic approach, but also continuous work as the needs arise, especially the gender violence, and also with the human rights issues. As I mentioned, we have completed our second survey very recently, and we are now designing pulse surveys. So these pulse surveys are to basically understand the changing environment, right, during the changing crisis. Turkey is now open. There is no curfew or major lockdowns. In a couple of cities, we have only lockdowns. And let's see what will happen, right? Like the whole world, we're also watching what will happen. And these pulse surveys will feed information from the enterprises point of view, what is happening from the ground and what is needed. And what we are also planning to do is we have initiated developing a trusted vendor list, especially the production of the personal protective equipment, because as we all know that this is not going to end soon, and we will continue needing standard, certified quality products for all of the society. We have what we also have done with after our survey findings, and what we are also doing at the moment is, of course, these webinars, these digital, meetups and platforms, meetings. So what were the most useful ones were the legal aspects, especially when you're focusing on the SMEs, and they need to understand these immediate government measures. So the legal aspects, the part-time working arrangements, the credit lines, the employer and employee responsibilities when there is a COVID case in the in the company, but also on the changing trade relations and customs regulations within this era. But also we didn't leave, of course, the gender aspect. So we have analyzed the equal access to economic support mechanisms, and also preventing the increased domestic violence due to lockdown at homes. So I think, stop here and come back to the screen. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay, so I think this is very in a nutshell what we have been doing. If you have questions, please write down so that it will be much more interactive. But also maybe I can continue. What are our the other items that we are already working, not maybe specifically to COVID, but for the sustainability agenda. What we have started when we were talking about the climate change is that to understand how private sector would be a partner in this, and then circular economy, of course. And I hear yesterday during the plenary sessions a lot of mentioned with regard to circular economy, how private sector is changing its way of working, and this is also picked up by Turkish enterprises, Turkish private sector as well. So this is like a method for us to change into a more responsible producer and also consumer. During the COVID days, we also touched upon these issues, not leaving the climate discussion behind, and we have done some sectoral how to say outlooks, sectoral webinars around both touching upon the COVID crisis and the sectoral approach to that, but also looking from a circular economy point of view and how to act beyond COVID in line with the sustainability agenda, basically. So we have done one for the food and agriculture. The other one was around textiles, of course. When we consider Turkey, it's one of the most prominent sectors. And then the last one was about the spaces, the circular spaces, thinking about the design nature, the urban planning nature of the circularity. So these were the items that we were working on. At the moment, what we are doing together with ILO, International Labour Organization, and also with UNDP and with Global Compact Turkey Network, we are working on a human rights assessment for private sector. So this COVID has given us an opportunity to work on this. The assessment, basically what we are referring to as one of the assessment tools that were produced by the Asia office in UNDP, sorry. Now we are transforming it into a Turkish context. Not just translation, but also putting and designing the questionnaires, meeting the needs and understanding of the Turkish private sector. Now we're planning with Global Compact Turkey office to launch this assessment as a pilot for the human rights issues, how private sector has reacted during these COVID days, and then we would like to expand that assessment to a wider community of private sector. Maybe I will stop here. Tina, did I miss anything? And also maybe to remind a couple of things that we have as CBI networks presenting more, and the information is available on connectingbusiness.org website. But what we have upcoming is multi-stakeholder response to natural disasters. Right, Madagascar. This is upcoming, if I'm not mistaken. So please stay with us. Do you have any questions? I can't see any questions or comments. This is supposed to be a an interactive booth. I think we also have a lot of information and documents on the Connecting Business website. What we are producing from all networks, uploading to that page, and what we are also doing is learning from each other. I'm sure other network members are also saying the same. And we are learning from each other, from Philippines, from Madagascar, and from many networks. Thanks to CBI Global, they're connecting us very regularly, and we're sharing our experiences. What we have went well, and what are the opportunities. So this is a very useful network for the ones who are working around, especially disaster and resilience. Thank you, Tina. I have a question. What has been the biggest private sector related lesson learned in Turkey during the COVID-19 pandemic? Private sector related lesson. I mean, for us, the lack of crisis response. So the business continuity plans or risk management plans is a lesson. So the thing is, I mean, we are a very risk-prone country. I mean, the economic risk is one thing, but also in terms of natural disasters, we have a lot of risks. The earthquakes, the heavy, weather conditions, not maybe tornadoes or that was, but the ones like the Asia Pacific. But we also have like extreme weather conditions as well. So the biggest lesson, I think, is to check our how to say risk map, right? Where am I doing business, and what are the natural risks around my environment, and how I can improve my risk management strategy, how I can improve my business continuity, what are my alternative customers or supply chains or means of transportation, and etc. So this is one of the learnings for the private sector and for us as well. Thank you, Holly. Thank you. We have another question from India, Bana, if I'm not wrong. I'm a PhD student. So can you give some examples from your country how you are pursuing SDGs, responsible production and consumption? Oh, sure. So yes. So this is one of the most important SDG. I mean, all of them are of course important, but when we're talking with the private sector, this is one of the the picked ones that the private sector is also willing to contribute a lot, right? I mean, sustainable production and consumption. So the establishment of the Business for Goals platform is basically directly related with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, to bring the SDG agenda into the private sector and to build this bridge. And this is an open platform. Business for Goals is an open platform to all companies, associations, research institutions, etc., who are willing to change how the private sector works, basically, internally. It's not about a CSR, it's not about just, philanthropy or other means, but basically from the resource management to the process management, and also at the end, waste management, this whole cycle, to transform this cycle, basically. And So what we are talking is that this is an inclusive platform for all types of partnerships. We facilitate those type of partnerships with private sector and with associations, and also with the UNDP. It's our global know-how leader, especially with around SDGs. And when it comes to, for instance, plastic use, when it comes to a circular economy, the UNDP experts are really helping us and guiding us while we're talking to private sector, and also when there is a need to connect with the public bodies as well. So this is like a bridge. The SDG 17 is the most the one basically the founding how to say goal of this platform, building partnerships, but also the others, like especially the responsible production and consumption is the second, maybe the most important to transform the private sector's approach. And also an answer to your question, as I mentioned, the circular economy is the methodology that we find, and also the private sector, how to say, I don't want to say understands, but how to say, acknowledge as a way of working. So with this one, especially for the responsible production and consumption, we advocate a lot around circular economy. It's not an easy terminology. I mean, when we translate it in Turkish, not really everybody, is aware of what is the circular economy. But what we're doing is to make it familiar with the practices already ongoing. So there are many SMEs, especially agricultural area, that who are already doing like very responsible interventions, processes, but they're not looking into, and they're not presenting themselves from the SDG point of view or from a circular economy point of view. What we're doing is like making it familiar, and also sharing good examples, both from Turkey and from globally, what could be done better. Our next step would be to establish an advisory board in Turkey, guiding about this circular economy, and also linking it with the European Green Deal. Now Turkey is one of the countries who has close trade relations with Europe, and European Green Deal coming on board with the new agenda. All Turkish companies who would like to make a trade with Europe has to align with it. So again, the circular economy gives that opportunity. So these were the advocacies that we're doing in Turkey. Thank you. I think we have another question from Vio. Okay, please do so. Vio, I think everybody can read, right? Okay, so we have another from Rizka S. Finite, as my knowledge, there are SMEs in Indonesia reacted to this pandemic, but not so integrated. Do you mind to share how to connect them together as one so that we can react to disaster properly and just? I really hear your question. So my suggestion would be, as we are experiencing in Turkey, just from my experience, having these, voluntary-based business associations on board is very crucial. Our partner Turkofed has this network to many SMEs, which brings them together into the discussion, which brings them together into a policy dialogue. Which brings them together for information sharing, between each other from our side, but also from their side. So it's not easy to deal with SME or enterprise one by one. but hearing them from from a collective voice, from associations or federations or confederations or whatever it's called, unions maybe, but it would be also crucial that this has this, voluntary mechanism within that association. That would be a good starting point. Okay, I can see Tina also responded to you, Rizka. Very good. Thank you. Do we still have time, or I think we're over, right? I mean, from my end. Thank you, Miami. Okay, at least, I can see your names. Okay, so yes, Madagascar is coming in, right? Great. Tina, shall I leave so that Madagascar can join? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice Global Compact week.